Hello everyone, welcome to my channel on data analytics. I am your host Professor Rage Uday Kiran. In this video, I will describe the format in which the users have to create their large data sets so that our algorithms can discover user interest based patterns in their data. The outline of my presentation is as follows. First, we describe the different elements of a database. Next, we will describe the structure of the database. And finally, we describe the storage policy that we have employed for creating the very large databases. The first one, elements of a database. A database basically contains two elements, data and metadata. Please note that the term data and metadata used for data mining purposes are slightly different from the database concepts. Okay, so in the data mining, we say data, especially in particular to pattern mining, we say that data stands for occurrences of elements or items. Metadata talks about the information about the items. So let us take an example to understand what is data and what is metadata in the prospection of pattern mining. So if we have a supermarket which is selling some items, okay, like bread, jam and all, and each item have their prices, okay. Now, if the customer, say customer 1 has visited the supermarket and he has purchased one bread, okay, two jam bottles, then when he is going out of the supermarket, he will pay the amount of $7, okay. Now, if we look at the customer purchase data, there are two elements of, okay, data and metadata. So bread and jam represent data, okay, because they are the ones that the customer has purchased. Metadata means the additional data that describe the customer purchases. For in this example, metadata is nothing but the prices of each item the user has purchased and then the total amount he has paid for both the items. These two constitute, okay, prices paid for each item and entire amount paid for the total transaction. They correspond to metadata. Metadata cannot exist without data. Henceforth, we have the following two rules. The first one is every database must contain data. That is rule 1. And the rule 2 is metadata is optional. If your database don't have metadata, it is fine. There are algorithms that can understand the data alone and extract the patterns from them. Okay? So these are the elements. Now, when we look at the structure of the database, please note that to create data sets, very large ones, you need to follow columnar format. Okay, the first column must always contain data. The remaining columns can contain metadata. And most important, the first column must be mandatory. That is, data must be presented. If you provide the data as metadata, the algorithms don't run. So please keep that in mind. The data you create has to be in columnar format with the first column always representing the data. For example, if the customer has purchased bread and jam in a supermarket, then the data, okay, bread comma jam represents the first column. Next, the prices they have paid for each item. For bread, they have paid $1. For jam, they have paid $6. So the prices of the items will come in the next column. And finally, the total amount paid can be the third column. So first column is data, the remaining columns contain metadata. Please note that within the columns, the order is maintained. For example, if bread is the occurring first in the first column, the value 1 also corresponds to bread. So the order is preserved across the columns. Now coming to the storage policy. Until now we have discussed the basic structure of the storing the big data. But if we want to store the data actually in the disk, how do we store it? So for that we have come up with the storage policy. So the storage policy is very simple. Databases are to be stored as text files. Okay, so the extension can be txt, it can be a csv file, or it can be csv file. Please note that we haven't written the programs to connect to the database and extract the data, because there are many types of databases that are available. We do not have sufficient manpower to do it. So users have to connect to their own databases, okay, like MySQL, Postgres, and so on, and then they have to create their databases as text files. Once you are planning to create the text files, the key question is, how do we store? To store the data in a file, we have come up with rules. Intercolumnar rules, that is the rules to be followed across the columns, and the rules that has to be followed within the column, that is intra-columnar rules. If we are talking about intercolumnar rules, please note that the columns have to be separated by a colon mark. This mark is immutable, means users cannot overwrite the colon mark. Colon mark always represents the separation of columns. When it comes to intra-columnar rules, okay, that is the elements within a column, they are by default separated by a tab space. We are not using comma here as the default separator, because there are some data sets like geo-referenced data sets where comma is included in the elements. Because of this reason, we are using tab space as the default separator. However, please note that within the column, this separator is mutable. That is, users can use their own separators. For example, if they want to use comma as the separator, they can use it without any problem. Only thing is, across the columns, the separator is fixed and it is colon. We did this to minimize the number of input parameters needed to execute an algorithm. Now, coming to the example, if we want to record the customer purchase data, okay, then what we do is we simply create a file. Let us say purchase data 1.txt. In this file, what we have to do is we first use colon to separate the columns. So we use the colon to separate the data column, and then use colon to separate the metadata columns. Okay. So And then within the column, the items are separated by tab space. If users want, they can also use comma here. So this is how the datasets have to be created by the users. So here is the information that you can see it. So we have a column separator which is fixed. It cannot be changed. It is hard coded into the algorithms. Whereas between the items of a column, we are using tab space as the default. However, users can overwrite it using their own separator. For example, comma they can use, semicolon they can use, full stop also they can use. So that is how you have to create. Now, as a summary, okay, so the reality is like this. Okay, users contain data generated by the users contain data and metadata. Okay, so when we are organizing the real world data, we first store the data in the first column. Metadata is stored in the remaining columns. And when we are saving the data as a file, the columns are split using a colon, and then within a column the elements are separated by default using the tab space. So very simple format of storing the data. The algorithms automatically understand this format and then discover the knowledge. Thank you very much for listening to our talk. If you like our video, please give it a thumbs up and please subscribe to our channel for interesting information and updates. Thank you.